I think, Johnny, because I've not met you before, I'm more nervous, I don't know why, but
Oh, we'll be grand.
I know, yeah. Let's see here. Setting up your meeting for Facebook Live. It's a lot of clicks and steps, just if you ever do this, like. Hello and welcome to another Tuesday morning of Missional Conversations here at Praxis. My name's Anne, and today I have with me to co-host Sam, and we've welcomed Johnny with us to talk to us. Welcome back. These are just informal chats with people doing mission across Ireland. So today we're going way far north with Johnny, and I always have like an antidote or something at the start of kind of just to start us off of like a favorite sweet or whatever. But I thought today, since we're talking about creation care, maybe what is your favorite like plant or thing you've grown before for both of you? Do you have a favorite?
Despite being a creation carer and running a community farm, I'm terrible with plants. In fact, house plants come to our house to die. And I'm not allowed on the farm. I'm not allowed anywhere near them. So the plants and me don't have a very happy relationship. But if I could choose an animal, which I'm more familiar with and know more about, I would probably choose snow leopard, which I have done a bit of work with in the wild and in captivity. So
whoa, okay. Awesome. Great. Do you have a plant, Sam? Or you can stick to an animal as well. Yeah. Do you have a plant with you? Oh, okay.
No, I have no idea what it is, but it sits on my windowsill and it's very nice. No, I think I'm much more successful at growing things outdoors than indoors.
Okay.
Although we did have a Christmas cactus.
Oh.
That kind of weird sort of flat leaf.
Yeah, they're not prickly.
No, they're not really prickly, and it flowered for the first time this year. Like we've had it for about 3 or 4 years, and the flowers on it were about this size, and it's a small plant, but it was incredible. So yeah, I think that's my favorite. It was just amazing watching this. It started off as this tiny little red like tip of a leaf, and then suddenly grew into this huge flower that looked like its weight shouldn't be supported on the leaves that it was on. So yeah,
that's great. Cool.
That's just a recent
growth. My favorite flower is like a dahlia, which are always really cool and intricate. I think I might have killed mine from last year though, so I got them from a farmer's market and it was bloomed. So that was the hard bit. They did that bit and I kept it in a pot, but I wasn't sure how to take care of it over the winter. So we'll see how it comes, if it comes back this spring. So that would be my favorite, and their intricate colors and everything would be mine. So thanks for joining us, Johnny. I've not met Johnny before. A little bit nervous / excited for this one. But we're going to talk about Jubilee, which is up in Lauren, right? And Johnny, do you want to just introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. So thank you for having me this morning. I was just saying before that we did a lot of church outreach, either bringing church groups to our farm and bringing the farm to church groups prior to the pandemic. And like a lot of the services and those community aspects, they've really decreased over the last year. So it's really nice to be doing this digitally. I am, when someone asks me where I'm from, I find it a very difficult question to give a straight answer to, because I was born in County Antrim in Lisburn, but and then I moved to Malawi. My parents were Presbyterian missionaries there. But we ended up in County Monaghan for 9 years, from 90 to 99, and then we were back in Malawi. So although I was born in Northern Ireland, I grew up in Monaghan and Malawi and returned to Northern Ireland only to go to university.
Okay.
And I'm a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none. Always wanted to be a farmer and a conservationist, but thought that setting up a community farm is going to be my midlife crisis. But here I am at the ripe old age of 33, having been running this for 3.5 years now. So that's it's been a bit of a whirlwind and adventure, but it's very exciting, and every day is different. There's something new going on.
That's awesome. And will you tell us a bit about Jubilee and what it is and the vision and activities and all that sort of stuff, even where it is or how big it is, just kind of give a picture for us?
Yeah, I suppose there's the organization and then there's the outworking of that, which is Jubilee Farm. organization, we were living in Cambridge, and I was doing research there, and my wife had ME and was quite ill, and we were just struggling with 2 small kids and mental and physical health. So we came back to Northern Ireland, to Carrickfergus, where my wife's parents live, and I finished my PhD part-time. But in the sort of seeds of that, what seemed like a defeat at the time was the seeds of what has become Jubilee, because on returning here, I just knew that the time was right to start the work, preparing the ground for what became Jubilee. And that was January 2014 that I wrote a vision document, because anything like this begins with a vision, some working of imagination of what could be, and then begins the difficult task of closing the gap between where you are now and where you want to get to.
Yeah.
Part of that journey was talking to others. We ran consultation meetings across Northern Ireland. When we settled on a town, which was Larne, we ran some consultation meetings in the town of Larne, and we moved to Larne to set up in a walled garden in a Catholic retreat centre in Larne. And unfortunately, for various reasons, that fell apart at a very late stage in January 2019, January 2018.
Okay.
And we weren't able to get a contract, but we'd spent all our limited pot of money and all our sort of built up the community support to set up in this particular site. We had about £300 left in our account, but we knew that the project was still meant to be. So we started to look for other sites, and there was a small farm for sale just outside Larne. It took us most of the year to raise the funds for it, but in January 2019, just as we bought the farm, having gone from £300 in our account a year before, we had just over £300,000 in our account, and we bought the farm. And it's an amazing story of provision and people just putting money in. Lots of people from all parts of these islands, all different church backgrounds, many not from a church background at all, would never darken the door of a church. And we bought the farm, and here we are 2 years later in the throes of the terrible twos.
Wow, that's amazing. And too, that you guys didn't give up or lose vision of that, or feel that that was it, done and dusted, and it's just over. That's great and cool to hear, and really cool to hear that it's only 2 years old. I didn't realize that as well. So yeah, still fresh and new.
Still lots of work to be done.
Especially
the
when
organization it's still early days. The organization is 4 in August, but the farm itself, so the farm is really the outworking of that, in that I suppose from university days, when I started to become I was always environmentally aware, but I suppose when I got to the stage of marrying that with a university education and realized the scale of the environmental crisis on one hand, but also growing up in the church, including at university, seeing what I perceive to be a real lack of theology and action and just engagement with arguably the defining issue of our age. But as the Chinese proverb says, it's better to light a candle than curse the darkness. So instead of just criticizing the absence of creation care in the Irish church, we thought that we would do something positive about it, but not just theorize and theologize about it, but actually put it into practice. As praxis, really, it's that combination of theory, theology, and the outworking of it, and the two go so very well together, because life is holistic, it's not dualist. And so it's an ongoing process, and engaging all sorts of stakeholders and parts of the church in that project.
That's awesome.
So tell us more about, this is missional conversations, and some people might be watching this thing kind of going, okay, so you run a farm. So what's that got to do with mission? And you started talking about creation care there. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about that. And maybe also, sorry, I'm terrible for double-pronged questions. Jubilee, tell us about the name. Why did you choose the name? Where did that come from? I am asking with a vested interest. So tell us about the name, and then tell us about, so how does Jubilee Farm, how does Jubilee fit with mission? What's the link?
Those are good questions. I'll start with the name because it leads to this theology of creation care. So we bandied around names for years, and we were actually at a community farm in Canada on a study tour in the summer of 2016, and just all of a sudden we're reading Leviticus 25, and had known the passage for years, obviously, but just all of a sudden just felt that that was the right name for the organization. And it was partly because realizing that that whole pattern of Jubilee, which may never have been applied historically, I don't think there's any evidence that it was ever put into practice, but nevertheless is there as a, well, really as the earliest example of sustainability, I would say, because it involves the land, which is the environment. It involves society, so families, households, the children of Israel in the Promised Land. It involves economic activity, and there were guidelines to prevent the overaccumulation of wealth and just to make sure that the economy worked fairly and equitably. But then, of course, there's the spiritual dimension missing mostly from secular sustainability that was there as the bedrock of the entire system. So it seemed to us as a good name to bring forward into the 21st century. Obviously, we're living in a very different world, but it's taking those principles, understanding them in context, and then applying them in the context of the 21st century. And that's really what we would also refer to as creation care. So we would define creation care as environmental and agricultural stewardship that incorporates four things: so flourishing, fairness, welfare, and well-being. And that's obviously a modern definition that we've used, a holistic definition, but it goes right back to beginning. It goes back to Genesis. It goes back to human beings being crafted from the soil, and even plays on words, the fact that, Adama is the Hebrew word from soil, from which we get Adam, and humans from humus. All of these intimate interconnections. And then it was Adam and Eve, and the context was the Garden of Eden. It then became the children of Israel, and the context was the Promised Land. And now it's the church universal around the world, and it's the Garden of Earth rather than the Garden of Eden. But it's still those same principles that are set out in various places in the Bible, sometimes explicitly, often implicitly, that we depend upon the natural world for our sustenance.
Yeah. And
without it, we cannot breathe, we cannot eat, we cannot drink, we cannot survive. And we call that an instrumental valuation of nature. So we look after it because it looks after us. It's there, and we need it to survive.
Yeah,
but then, of course, there's also, what is that?
We forget that sometimes. Yeah,
we do. We're so
removed from it. Yeah.
Yeah, especially in a technological age. Although this year has reminded us on what a deck of cards, house of cards we've built, human civilization. The other aspect then is what we would call an intrinsic rationale for looking after nature or caring for creation, which from in the Judeo-Christian tradition is that coming out of agrarian peoples in the Middle East, of this ethic, I suppose, of that is both agricultural and environmental, of looking after a world that is God's at the end of the day primarily, and therefore we have both the privilege and the responsibility of looking after it. And so Jubilee seemed like an appropriate term to sum all of that up. And if you're interested in more of our in-depth analysis of that, with a series of blogs on creation care and mission, and also some diagrams that link what we're doing and sort of try to visualize it in terms of those theological models and link it to some other big ideas, you can find that on our website.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's great. That's so cool.
Thank you. No, it's, like creation care is, I think there's a strategic risk for the church in that, in terms of millennials, Generation Y comes next and whatever comes after that. These are the most environmentally engaged generations in human history, partly by choice, but also by necessity, because the environmental constraints of living on a finite planet are catching up with us as human beings. And yet it continues to be something, although there are many positive changes, but particularly at a high level, I think there's still limited action and activity and leadership from the churches. And I worry that that's a risk for the church, that it risks alienating entire generations, which are already alienated in other areas, but on this area where there could be considerable common ground, that there's another divergence. So it's something I think the church needs to take seriously on a number of different levels.
Yeah.
It's also a great opportunity to show leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us more about what that looks like practically in how you, in the outworking of how Jubilee works and what you do. And
yeah, so we're a community enterprise. We're a community benefit society, which is a fairly recent corporate, actually cooperative form that isn't present in the Republic, but it really ought to be, because it's a fantastic organizational model. It's really a cooperative social enterprise with a really innovative way to raise capital, which, well, the main reason we chose it, in that you can issue community shares to finance the purchase of an asset. So in our case, we raised that money to buy farms from 155 people who we call our member owners.
Yeah.
And also some peer-to-peer loans and some grants. And then we do three things at Jubilee Farm now that we have it. We do community supported agriculture, which is, we like to say it puts the culture back into agriculture. It's, in economic terms, it's a subscription service to a farm. You subscribe to a farm, just like you subscribe to a telecoms company for your internet and your phone, and you get food in return, be it a veg box or a quarter pig or half a goat or a Christmas bird. But it's, you know, it's more than just the economic transaction, which is a good one because it helps. We're able to charge retail prices, not wholesale prices, but it's really about the restoration of relationship, which is what Creation Care is about too, and restoring that relationship between food producers, food eaters, between people and places. And so it's the first in Northern Ireland. There's a few others now springing up, and there's I think there's maybe about 10 in the Republic, including some in the greater Dublin area.
Cool.
But then that's really the food production side of things. So you just have a farm animals. This is the mouser. This is agroecological pest control.
Yeah. And not for eating. Yeah.
Not for eating, no. We do two aspects of services then, which are really important and innovative. One is care or social farming. So it's using farm-based activities for the therapeutic value for vulnerable groups in particular. So we take referrals from the health service. Those are mostly adults with learning difficulties. And then we also have a pilot project with refugees and asylum seekers who are referred from, originally from the Presbyterian Church Centre in Belfast, but now from a couple of different centres, and they come 1 day a week and just spend time volunteering on the farm and learning new skills, learning Northern Irish, and us learning about where they've come from. And it's wonderful. So today, for example, we have folks from Zimbabwe, Ivory Coast, Syria, Dublin. We have Catholic nun, we have lots of independent Christians, we have Presbyterians, we have just this kaleidoscope of people here at Jubilee Farm, and it's wonderful to see. And that's, I suppose, another reason for Creation Care. It's that relationship that we have with the world around us that is good for us. You know, God made it to be us to have relationship with Him, with ourselves, with each other, but also the missing part often is that relationship with the world around us that we need. It helps us survive, but it helps us thrive too. And lastly, the third aspect, the third service we do then is education and engagement. So working with churches, to a lesser extent schools, running courses. We have a course on community farming coming up that you can sign up for if you're interested. It's free and mostly online. And we do festivals. It's a catch-all phrase. We do internship programs. We have summer internships coming up, non-residential ones this year. And just engaging as many different people in what we do here, and a focus more on the conservation aspect of the farm. We have a small nature reserve with otters in the river and buzzards nesting in this little wild part of the farm that we treasure very much.
That's awesome.
I loved how you talked about the restoration of relationship, and just in terms of even bringing people into work to kind of work the land, and even that kind of kaleidoscope, you know, that's almost like this picture of the kingdom. people from, every tribe, every nation, united together. And I think it's always struck me, I know Tearfund's, their kind of theory of change, or sort of their theology of mission is all about restored relationships, and it's exactly as you've described it. And yeah, I think there's something really beautiful in that. And earlier you talked about some of the gaps and where, maybe the church has an opportunity to show leadership, or to do similar things. What would the dream be? Like, how would you love to see the church showing leadership in demonstrating the kingdom in this way? And you talked about connecting the younger generations as well. What are some of the dreams?
I think there's a real opportunity for churches, because whether they're urban or rural, but especially if they're urban, they often have space around them. They have space in terms of buildings, which are often unused during the week or for large parts of the week, in however many hours there are in a week. They also often have green space around them. And obviously you can't start digging up graveyards, but apart from that,
yeah, true.
You have to be careful with that.
Dust to dust and all that.
Yeah. There's also this green space, and we have this terrible cultural obsession across the Western world of having these little pockets of grass in front of our houses that are of no practical use. Okay, you can play football and rugby and whatever on them, and that's important, especially if you have kids and things. That's fine, keep some space for that. But we have this obsession with having acres of lawn that really could be used for other things. And you see a lot of that around churches, just acres of lawn that require huge amounts of person power to mow. All of that could be used productively, that in terms of engaging people, in terms of growing food, also in terms of creating space for wildlife. So we have this also, it's particularly in Ulster, but I think it's, you get it across Ireland, of everything being neat, of the countryside, the hedges have to be cut within an inch of their life, and you can't let the grass grow about more than 2 inches. Whereas actually, just let it grow, let the flowers bloom, let them be there for pollinators. It's also less, it saves money in terms of labor to cut it and things like that. And so that, I think using those spaces as almost little community gardens, if not community farms, I think there's a great opportunity. The other thing is using then the buildings, possibly for social or community enterprises, or even for profit enterprises that can use that space during the week, making them hubs for innovative projects that simultaneously meet needs, social, economic, environmental, and generate wealth too. I'd love to see more of those sort of projects happening. That's very much grassroots. I think it needs to be married with then high level engagement, advocacy, and theology with trainee and current church leaders, lay and ordained, across all the denominations. And that's something that we would love to see, and that I hope we'll do a little bit of work on in the coming, hopefully this year, subject to funding, just to map out what could be done and what needs to be done, what's already been done, because there are lots of little projects all over the place. But that sort of engaging with church leaders, I think, is important, and just helping them to see this significance for the church.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I love that, thinking of like all the wildflowers and bees around churches across the island or something, or the vegetables being grown, or herbs, or whatever it is, like, just the change in that would be beautiful.
Yeah, one other thing, this may be more of a factor in perhaps in England, but particularly where there have been state churches, they're often still, whether or not they're still attached to the state or not, they're often quite significant landowners. I'm thinking of the Church of England in particular. And for people who want to get into farming, community groups, people like me who wanted to farm but had no farm, accessing lands is really quite a challenge. And I think there's got to be opportunities for, instead of just renting out farmland to the highest bidder, to think more creatively about using that portfolio of land to give new farmers, community farmers, younger farmers, just opportunities, different. I think that that's another piece of work. I don't know if there is, the religious orders and the churches in Ireland own much land, but there's got to be opportunities there.
Yeah.
If they do.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting, even in, where Anne and I are both in Dublin, where there's so little, I mean, in some ways there's a little green space in some places, but certainly where I live, because it's all being built over in student accommodation in Fells, but we'll not get into that. But there is something, even where for the church to see very practically that we're stewarding a resource and that the land is our resource, and the land that we have that we tarmac over to make car parks, actually there's a stewardship question there. There's how could this be used in service of the community? How could this be served? How could this be used to demonstrate, what God is about in, renewing and restoring things and creating life, intending life? Yeah, I think there's a really interesting particular challenge with that.
Yeah, especially at this time as maybe restrictions lift, or the spring and summer are coming. That's a good opportunity right now for churches to think about that. If we can't go into our buildings, we could actually still maybe be outside as things lift and as the sun keeps shining, and there's space to think more creatively about that. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Connie, is there anything in terms of like there's a bit of advice there in terms of churches, but in terms of an individual level, how would you advise people to get involved with creation care, even at their own doorstep, but also even with Jubilee or other places around Ireland? What advice would you give like the individual in terms of that topic? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always wary of just prescribing a list of, do's and don'ts, because well, the church has been doing that for 2,000 years, and it becomes, I call it eco-Pharisaism. It very quickly becomes, you can't eat red meat, you can't do this, you can't do it.
Yeah.
It takes the joy out of it. It's not about legalism, it's about joy and, relational living. So
yeah.
I'm not going to sort of give you this, here's my top 10 eco commandments and whatever. That's for you to go think about yourself, and everybody's life looks different. Some people need 2 cars and some people don't need any cars, just depending on where they live and whether they've kids and all of that. I would say that probably the 2 biggest things in terms of the impact in the world around us, one is food. And so think about where your food comes from. Can you, maybe not everything replace the supermarket, but can you get some things? Can you reduce the quantity and increase the quality of the meat that you eat? Can you buy it direct from a farmer? Sometimes think about it as relationship, not just commodity.
Yeah.
And the other thing is energy, which I think is much harder to take action on because we need systematic change at a very broad scale to see that happen. But things like energy efficiency, including in church buildings, are really useful. But all of these things, particularly for low-income families, it's really hard for action to happen here. So it's an area where we need proactive state, to work on that, as well as proactive markets and proactive civil society. It's not, none of those alone have all the answers. There are solutions to be found in each of those sectors of human activity and areas where, well, on particular environmental issues, they need to be working together.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Yeah, because it can become so legalistic or just privilege. Like I have to check my privilege constantly, and that like I can afford a Keep cup to get my coffee in or whatever it is, but that's not practical for so many people. So yeah, thanks. And just the need for diversity and the variety of different ways and choices we can make in life in different seasons. So thank you for that. Yeah. Is there any, Sam, is there something else you want to add?
I was looking forward to your 10 steps to,
he had his pen ready.
Just one quick question. You must have, setting up the farm, things falling through and then getting the farm and all that. There must be a lot of things that just go wrong or that you laugh. I'm kind of just intrigued, like what has made you laugh the most? I mean, there's probably a lot of stuff that's made you cry, but what makes you laugh the most in the midst of all of this?
I could tell you more. There's a couple of things that have nearly made me cry. It has been, I mean, we're pretty good at PR and marketing, but behind the shiny brand and the spin, there have been a lot of very dark and difficult days to get to where we are. So a lot of setbacks, but success is not the absence of failure, but the mastery of failure. Indeed, you have to fail first you're not failing, you're not trying. And it's, I really admire that sort of North American entrepreneurial spirit, gung-ho, where, you know, if you haven't set up and failed with at least 3 different startup companies, you're not a real entrepreneur. You know, I admire the ethos of just keeping trying. In terms of what makes me laugh about it, I don't know, I have to think about that. You sort of thrown me for 6. There's the day-to-day stuff. Just seeing new life is always lovely to see. We have this breed of goat called Anglo-Nubians, which are a cross between an African goat, the Nubian, and the Anglo, obviously. And they have these big, long, droopy ears, and they're just a bit, especially when they're kids, they're very cute. They're mostly legs and ears with this big body in between. And, you know, just seeing that, the site that we have, the view is just, it's extraordinary. It's a constant source of therapy and delight, you know, in all seasons of the year and of the soul. And that's, I don't know if it makes us laugh, but it makes us smile every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Johnny. I'm just conscious of time and stuff. So thanks, Sam and Johnny, for joining us. And yeah, I'll put links down in the comments around this post, and for Jubilee's website, and even the workshops that you were talking about that people can sign up for around community farming, right? Those are the ones coming up. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. And we'll see you in a few weeks. See ya.
Thanks, Johnny. Bye.
All right.